Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Tyler left home exactly at 7:12 a.m., just like every day. The morning routine was almost automatic. The sink was still dripping water from the glass he had rinsed seconds earlier, while Madison adjusted her earrings in front of the hallway mirror. They both walked out the door together, exchanged a quick kiss, and headed toward their cars. He turned south, she turned north. That routine had worked for years. The house they lived in was chosen specifically for that reason. It was halfway between their two jobs, which made life easier for both of them. It was practical, functional, efficient. Exactly how they always imagined a mature marriage should be. Still early in his drive, Tyler's phone buzzed with Chris's name flashing on the screen. He answered with his right hand, resting his elbow on the open window. His friend sounded frustrated and embarrassed. His car wouldn't start at all, and he was about to miss an important meeting. Tyler hesitated for a second but quickly made a U-turn and started heading toward Chris's neighborhood. He knew the way well, knew exactly where his friend lived. As he rounded a corner near downtown, a reflection in a café window caught his eye. At first, he recognized Madison's light brown hair. Then he noticed her expression. She was smiling in a way he hadn't seen in weeks. Sitting across from her was a man in a dark suit leaning over the table. The touch on her arm looked intimate, like someone holding the wrist of someone they know inside and out. It was Charles Whitman, her boss. Tyler's stomach turned. He slammed on the brakes hard. Traffic behind him complained, but he barely heard it. His mind immediately searched for explanations. It could have been a work conversation, a coincidence, a quick coffee. But the way she laughed, the way he looked at her, everything screamed that there was something more going on. Tyler looked around and found a tight parking spot on the back street. He didn't think twice. He maneuvered quickly, parked, and got out. He was breathing short, almost bracing himself for impact. He turned the corner on foot, dodging busy people rushing through their routines, unaware of what was about to happen. His heart raced out of rhythm. Not out of fear of the answer, but because deep down, he already knew. When he pushed open the cafe door, Charles was standing up, fiddling with his wallet. He was paying the bill as if the meeting had been completely normal. Tyler stopped for a moment. He took in the scene. Madison saw him and froze. Her eyes searched his, but found no support or comfort, only a silent question. Her voice came out shaky, "What are you doing here?" Tyler didn't respond right away. He took a deep breath, rubbed his forehead, as if trying to organize what could still be said. He told her he received a call from Chris, whose car had broken down, so he had turned around. And on the way, he saw the two of them. That was all. Madison tried to smile, but the tension was visible even in her shoulders. Charles stepped forward with forced ease, extended his hand, and greeted Tyler as if they were old friends. "Good to see you, Tyler. Didn't expect to run into you here." Tyler stared at him for 2 long seconds before shaking his hand. The gesture was mechanical. Tyler's head was somewhere else entirely. He didn't explode, didn't question, didn't accuse. He swallowed everything in silence. It was as if he had locked the pain away to deal with later. He returned to his car and drove to Chris's house, pretending everything was under control. He picked up his friend, took him to work, and spent the rest of the day pretending that cafe, that touch, that smile, none of it had happened. But it had. And something inside him knew, the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to wake up. Tyler arrived home with his thoughts stuck on the cafe scene. He had forced himself to finish his workday as if nothing had happened, but his stomach kept churning. He asked himself repeatedly whether he should confront Madison the moment he walked in or wait for her to say something on her own. On the way back, the silence in the car only fed his anxiety. And when he opened the front door, he was met with something that only increased the sense of unease. The dinner table was set with more care than usual. Dishes usually reserved for special occasions were on the tablecloth, accompanied by the wine he liked and the meals she knew how to cook perfectly. Madison appeared smiling, wearing a dress she hadn't worn in a long time. He pretended to be surprised, but inside, each detail seemed like a disguise. She kissed him, pulled out his chair, and sat facing him, keeping her gaze steady, as if she had rehearsed this moment. Tyler thanked her for the food, forcing a naturalness that no longer existed. He ate in silence for a few minutes, watching her gestures, noticing her attempt to keep the conversation light, talking about work, the neighbors, the show they watched together. He responded only what was necessary, avoiding looking into her eyes for too long, because every time he did, he remembered Charles's touch and the stifled laughter in the café. Finally, she put down her utensils, took a deep breath, and said she needed to tell him something important. He put his fork down, listened closely, without showing any reaction, just waiting. Madison intertwined her fingers on the table and dropped the news: she was pregnant. The words came slowly, as if heavy. Tyler took a few seconds to process. He swallowed hard, mouth slightly open. At first, he felt shock. They had been trying for a while, and the frustration of negative tests had already worn both of them out. His heart briefly wavered, feeling a flicker of hope, maybe even joy. But then something cold ran down his spine. The memory of Charles, the intimacy in the café, the touch on her arm. Doubt crept in like a silent poison, subtle, but present. He smiled, hiding his feelings. He said it was wonderful news. She got emotional, went over and hugged him. He returned the hug with his hands on her shoulders, without pulling her close. The next morning, as they poured coffee in the kitchen, Tyler looked at her with the calm of someone who has chosen the right moment. He asked about her meeting with Charles. He mentioned that he had passed by chance, saw the two of them together, and wanted to understand better. Madison stiffened at the sound of it. For 2 seconds, she seemed to recalculate her response. She said she was planning to talk to Charles anyway, that she wanted to share the pregnancy news and ask for a raise. She argued that the news changed a lot, that she needed stability, and that her boss had shown support. She said that was why he had hugged her, just a human reaction. Tyler stayed still, listening. He stirred the sugar with a spoon, unhurried. He asked why she chose to tell her boss before telling her own husband. She replied that she acted on impulse, that she was afraid of his reaction, that she didn't yet know how to tell him, and thought securing more stability at work would be a way to prepare the ground. He nodded, but something cracked inside him. There was no scandal, no yelling, no plates breaking. It was the silence between sentences that screamed the loudest. Her explanation seemed plausible, but every detail brought more suspicion. The scene at the café wouldn't leave his mind. The laughter, the touch, the atmosphere between them. And now, the fact that she had gone to her boss first created an invisible wall. Tyler finished his coffee, kissed her forehead, and left for work as if everything was fine. But inside him, something had already been damaged. And even though he didn't realize it yet, that day marked the beginning of a path where certainty would begin to disappear. Tyler threw himself into the new phase ahead. The pregnancy news brought immediate changes to the rhythm of the house. He started waking up earlier to prepare breakfast for Madison, attended every medical appointment attentively and joyfully, recorded the baby's heartbeat, carefully saved ultrasound images, and talked about the child enthusiastically with close friends. Every time Madison felt the first kicks, he placed his hand on her belly as if it were the first time. They bought clothes, decorated the nursery with care, and discussed baby names late into the night, laughing and making plans for the future. It was as if they were rediscovering their closeness, now as parents. Their routine revolved around anticipation. Tyler read books about fatherhood, learned diaper-changing techniques, and signed up for a first aid course. Madison, despite some fatigue common during pregnancy, remained cheerful and seemed calm. The mood between them became lighter, more united. Family and friends said the baby was already deeply loved even before being born. There was a sparkle in Tyler's eyes whenever he spoke about his son. In the last weeks of the pregnancy, he reorganized his work shifts to be more present. Everything revolved around the baby's arrival. It was the most anticipated moment of their lives. Noah was born on a quiet afternoon, without complications. When the doctor placed the baby in his arms, Tyler felt something he didn't know existed inside him. Noah's cry sounded like a direct call to the center of his chest. The boy was small, delicate, and curled up when he heard loud noises, but when he heard Tyler's voice, he calmed down. His eyes, still half closed, seemed to recognize his presence. And in that instant, there was no doubt, no pain, no suspicion. Only love. The days at home were intense. Tyler shared every task with Madison. During nights when Noah woke crying, Tyler got up first, wrapped the baby in a blanket, and walked with him around the house until sleep returned. They developed a silent connection. Noah slept better against Tyler's chest than anywhere else. While bathing the baby, Tyler sang to him as if the whole world was contained within those four walls. He began memorizing Noah's habits, his looks, the way he scrunched his nose before sneezing. It felt like learning a new language, and he was determined to become fluent. Time passed and the baby grew. Slowly, facial features began to take shape. Tyler found himself joking about guessing whether Noah would take after him in smile, eyes, or face shape. He took photos comparing the baby with his own parents, his siblings, even with himself as a baby. Visitors commented that Noah looked different, but no one said from whom. Tyler laughed, changed the subject, and said it was still too early to tell. Over time, however, certain features started to stand out: the shape of the eyes, the jawline, the outline of the nose. They didn't look like him. And this realization started small, planted unintentionally, but it soon began to grow. In moments alone with his son in his arms, the thought surfaced without permission. It wasn't an accusation, not a certainty. It was a nagging worry. Something small that hurt silently. Even with all his devotion, even with the real love he felt, the doubt was there. Hidden between touches and feedings, between smiles and bottles, but alive. The resemblance to a familiar face began to take form. Tyler didn't mention it to anyone. Not even to Madison. He continued acting the same. But inside him, something had begun to change. And although everything seemed perfect on the outside, a father's heart, when sensing something strange, can never stay silent for long. Tyler held Noah in his arms while watching his sleeping son. The soft snore, the calm breathing, the subtle movements of his hands while dreaming. It was all so small, so innocent, but inside, his chest felt suffocated. Noah's features continued to evolve over time, but instead of bringing father and son closer, they drifted apart. It was like putting together a puzzle with pieces from another box. He compared old photos, reviewed childhood videos, analyzed traits, looked for signs. What once was just concern now felt almost certain. And with that certainty came weight. He loved that child, that fact was undeniable. But the love he had for Noah now coexisted with a new, unfamiliar pain, the feeling of living a lie. Madison continued acting as if everything were normal. Affectionate, dedicated, loving. Tyler observed every gesture closely, her glances, her words, her silences. He waited for the moment she might say something. Anything. But the days repeated themselves, and she maintained the same posture. He began sleeping poorly, avoided being alone with his own thoughts for too long, but at the same time, needed silence to reflect. He spent nights sitting in his car in front of the house, listening to the engine off, staring into nothingness. The idea of doing a DNA test entered his mind like a blade. He rejected it the first time. He told himself he didn't need that. But as the evidence piled up, the desire for certainty stopped being a choice. It became a necessity. Before taking any action, he decided to talk to Madison. He wanted to give her the chance to tell the truth. He chose an ordinary evening. He waited for Noah to fall asleep and called her to the kitchen. They stood face to face. Without beating around the bush, he asked if there was anything she wanted to tell him. She smiled confused, asking why he was so serious. He insisted, saying he felt something was wrong. She hesitated for a few seconds but denied it. She said everything was fine, that he was just tired, and that he needed to trust her. Tyler then brought up the baby's resemblance to someone else. He said Charles's name. And in that instant, her face lost all expression. It was as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. She tried to deny it. She stammered. Said it was just a coincidence. But he kept looking into her eyes, silently waiting. Madison grabbed the edge of the sink, turned her face away, and started crying. It didn't take long. With a trembling voice, she confessed. She said it happened once, during a conference. That they had drunk, were alone, and that she regretted it the moment it ended. Tyler listened silently. Each word felt like a sentence. The air felt heavy, as if the entire world was suffocating in that room with them. She tried to touch his arm, but he moved away. He said he needed proof. That he would do the test. Madison didn't react. She simply nodded, crying without strength. Days later, he took a saliva sample from the boy while he slept. He took the material to a clinic and waited for the results with an anguish that no longer fit inside him. When he received the envelope, his hands trembled. The world around him seemed silent. He opened it carefully, reading the printed words that rang like shouts in his soul. The probability of paternity was 0. Tyler felt his body collapse. He sat on the garage floor, holding the paper, trying to understand how it had come to this. The pain was raw. A whole year believing, raising, giving everything. A whole year calling someone his son when the child had never truly been his. But the boy was innocent. Tyler knew that. The fault wasn't Noah's. But he couldn't see himself living that life anymore. He couldn't decide whether to go upstairs and tell everything or simply pack a suitcase and walk away without a word. His head spun, his stomach twisted. When he finally entered the house, everything was quiet. Madison was asleep on the couch with the TV on low volume, exhausted from the day with Noah. He didn't say anything. He walked to the boy's room and stayed there, watching his son sleep. He tried to connect everything he had experienced with the child to the new truth he now carried. It was confusing. And cruel. The next morning, Madison appeared in the kitchen without saying a word. Her eyes were swollen, her face tense. Tyler was already there, standing beside the counter with the open envelope on the table. She looked at the paper, then at him. No questions. Just silence. Then she took a deep breath, sat down slowly, and said, in a low, hoarse voice, "Did the results come back?" Tyler nodded. She didn't try to deny it. The truth was already there, exposed and raw. She ran her hands through her hair, as if trying to find strength in an automatic gesture, and then said everything at once, without hesitation. It was just once. I regretted it the same moment. I was scared, Tyler. Scared of losing you. And when I found out I was pregnant, I wanted to believe it was yours. He didn't answer immediately. He stood firm, but broken inside. He crossed his arms, kept his gaze on her, and said without raising his voice, "You had 9 months to tell me. And another year after that. You had every chance. But you chose silence." She tried to step closer, but he stepped back. He grabbed the backpack he had packed before she woke up, put his wallet in his pocket, and said, without anger, just finality, "I'm leaving now. I'll come back another day to get the rest." And before she could say anything, he opened the door and walked out, leaving behind not just a house, but everything he had once believed to be true. He went straight to a hotel. He spent the day there, trying to sleep, unable to. He kept his phone on airplane mode. The next day, with sunken eyes and a worn-out face, he went to a lawyer recommended by an old college friend. He sat across from the professional, handed over all the documents, showed messages, photos, receipts, and laid out every detail, from the pregnancy to the paternity test. The lawyer listened carefully and, at the end, said the case was strong. That there were clear grounds not only for a lawsuit for fraud, moral damages, and parental alienation, but also room to involve her boss, Charles, for inappropriate behavior and abuse of authority in the workplace. Tyler agreed to proceed with both cases. It wasn't just one lawsuit, it was two. One against Madison, one against Charles and the clinic. The lawyer advised gathering more evidence of their relationship, old emails, travel records, financial activity. Within days, the documents were organized and both lawsuits were filed. But the story leaked before the first hearing. Someone from the courthouse, perhaps an employee, perhaps someone from the law office, published the documents in social media groups, and soon the story spread. Websites began publishing headlines about the betrayed engineer who discovered the truth through a DNA test, and the employee who got pregnant by her boss and hid it from her husband. The community was in shock. Madison lost her job at the clinic. The network that owned the facility launched an internal investigation and, a few days later, suspended Charles from leadership in disgrace. He was removed from the executive board and had his professional license frozen pending further decisions from the ethics committee. Both were subjected to intense public exposure. Madison began being avoided even by former close friends. Tyler, on the other hand, was approached by neighbors, co-workers, and even strangers offering support or requesting interviews, which he always declined. He isolated himself completely. Avoided reading comments or getting involved with any kind of public attention. He focused on finishing this with dignity. He attended every hearing. Always with his head high, but with a heavy look of someone who had lost something irreplaceable. When the judge read the verdict, the courtroom was silent. The judge acknowledged the irreversible emotional damage, the deliberate emotional deception, psychological harm, and public exposure. Tyler was awarded $750,000 in compensation. The court also recommended that Charles's case be referred to the state's Professional Ethics Committee, with risk of permanent license revocation. Tyler listened to the decision without relief. He simply thanked the court, signed the documents, and left without looking back. This all felt like a necessary ending, but far from a victory. That night, he returned to the old house one last time. He didn't look at or speak to Madison and went straight to Noah's room. The boy was asleep. The room still smelled like a baby, toys scattered around, the night light on. Tyler entered quietly, approached slowly. He stood there for minutes. The boy stirred, turned his face, and upon opening his eyes, smiled recognizing him. He stretched out his arms and murmured, "Daddy." The word he had waited months to hear now tore through him. Tyler knelt beside the crib, placed his hand gently on the boy's chest, and cried silently. He kissed his forehead softly and whispered, "You will always be loved. But I need to go. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.